So like Vince just said, my name is Amy Munn, and I've had the privilege of serving over in Zambia since last June. And I do much better with written word. I know I say this every time I give a presentation, so I'm sorry if it's annoying that I read some of this, but a 25-minute talk is a little hard to remember. But for those of you who don't know me, Vince gave a little preview, but there are some things that you have to know about me before I kind of dive in. And the first thing is, like Vince said, I have been in love with Zambia and the children of Zambia for a very long time. In 2006, I was a senior here in State College at Grace Prep High School, and I was given the opportunity to go on that kind of first trip over to Zambia. And I had never before ever thought that I would be a missionary or anything in Africa. Never really knew anything about Zambia. But as soon as I stepped off the plane, like Vince said, I was hooked. I just knew that God had created me for this place and that my life was never going to be the same. I got to return to Zambia 2 times after that trip while I was in college, and I was ready. But God kept telling me to wait. And I wish that I could stand up here and tell you that I was a really good waiter, but I was not. I had to wait for 6 years, and it was the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do. There were definitely seasons where I was impatient, frustrated, angry, confused, hurt, disappointed, and on more than one occasion, I remember literally just like shaking my fist at God and saying, "You are wrong. You are wasting my time. You are wasting your time. You are wasting the time of these precious children. What are we waiting for?" But 6 years later, I finally realized that I was wrong, like usual, and that He was right. During those 6 years of waiting, I experienced some of the most painful and heart-wrenching moments of my entire life. But I realized that in the end, that's exactly what I needed to be prepared to go be a teacher in Zambia. I needed to go through the murk and the darkness and learn the hard way that God will never leave me. I needed to earn my own testimony of His faithfulness, His grace, His strength, and His love. I needed to learn for myself that God is good even when I am drowning in the bad. Because if I had never learned that, how would I ever look in the face of my precious students and tell them that God loves them? Yeah. So I learned after those 6 years, I did experience the pain. And I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. And I learned David's truth, that the Lord is my shepherd, and He will never leave me, and I shall never want. And I have learned that that truth is not just for me in State College, Pennsylvania. It is for a shepherd boy who was turned into a king thousands of years ago. And it is the same promise that God offers to my HIV-positive boy who sits in the front desk of my classroom. So this past January, like I said, I moved there in June. But in January, after 6 months of floating between our 2 schools and observing the teachers and learning the language and settling into life in Zambia, I was given my own classroom. I was entrusted with 12 grade 1 students and 21 grade 2 students. Yes, that is 33 students from 2 different grade levels in one tiny classroom. We have 9 desks. And it is definitely a daunting and grueling task, and I've had my fair share of pull your hair out moments. But these past few months have given me the opportunity to implant myself in my students' lives like I never had before. I am no longer just the token white girl who floats in and out, and they sometimes forget my name, but they know I'm white. Now I am teacher, and along with that title comes other titles, like nurse and pastor and referee and chef and coach and mother. Being a full-time teacher at Haven of Hope has completely changed the tone of my ministry in Zambia. It has accelerated it, and it has made it more accessible. And slowly but surely, it is helping me tear down the walls that exist between me and the Zambian people. Now, if you've never been to Zambia, I don't want to give you the wrong impression like these people are standoffish or hard to get to know, because that couldn't be more opposite of the truth. But there are still walls that exist there. There are walls based on the color of my skin and the size of my bank account. Walls that seem to put me up on a pedestal and make me look like some sort of martyr. And while I appreciate the heartfelt thanks that parents offer me every time we see each other, I wish that they could truly understand how thankful I am to them for giving me the opportunity to come into their lives and teach their children. I desperately want them to understand that I don't work at Haven of Hope because I feel sorry for these students. I work at Haven of Hope because their beautiful parents and caregivers are my brothers and sisters in Christ, and I want to come beside them and help shape their children into the future leaders of Zambia. I work at Haven of Hope because their children give me hope, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. And I work at Haven of Hope because I can be a broken, self-centered person at times, and I desperately want to learn how to love and live like Jesus before it's too late. So tonight, I am here to be a witness. I am here to tell you the story of Haven of Hope from the battlefield. I am here to tell you about the victories we have graciously been given and the ones we still have a long way yet to win. I am here to tell you the often heartbreaking stories behind the smiles that you see. Zambians are known for their smiles and the contagious joy they exude. But if you knew their stories, you would truly marvel at their strength. And so I'm here to be their voice, not to make you feel guilty or twist your arm, but to hopefully open your eyes and make these students of Haven of Hope more than just a picture. Because they are more than a picture. They are living, breathing, dreaming, hurting, hoping, growing, learning, and trusting children who deserve better than what they've been born into. So let me introduce you to some of my students. This is Mary. She is in grade 2, and Mary is one of my most outgoing, personality-filled students, and anyone who has ever been to Haven of Hope remembers her. Mary and her older brother James are double orphans, meaning they have lost both of their parents. And they live with their grandparents about 15 minutes away from the school. One day, Mary came in and was acting very un-Mary-like. She was quiet and wouldn't even smile when I went over to give her my morning hug. And a few minutes later, I heard one of the boys next to her say, "Teacher, Mary is crying." When I saw that she was crying, I tried to talk to her, but she refused to answer. So I decided to send her to Charity Banda's office. Side note, for those of you who have never met Charity Banda, I am sorry. She has been one of the highlights of my trips, or my time in Zambia. And if you have on your table, you'll find a poem that she actually wrote for the children of Haven of Hope. It is her own words, but she so beautifully represents what we are trying to do. And from the Zambian perspective, what she is so thankful to the people of Haven of Hope for. So anyway, I sent Mary to Charity because she has the uncanny ability to connect with each of our students in a special way. Mary is in love with Charity, and I knew that if anyone could get her to talk, it would be Charity. And I was right. During break time, Charity called me into the office to tell me why Mary had been upset. Mary was sad because that weekend her grandfather had been so sick that he was sent to the hospital. Now, many American children would probably feel scared and worried the same way if one of their grandparents had gone to the hospital. But that's not exactly why Mary was upset. For Mary and her brother James, their grandfather entering the hospital meant that their lives were suddenly left in a very questionable position. You see, Mary's grandmother is almost 100% blind. So Mary came to school that day worrying, who will take care of me and my brother if my grandfather dies? 8-year-old girls should not have to worry about that. Thankfully, God turned this situation into an opportunity for Charity and I to pray for Mary and James and to just talk through some of the scary stuff with her. I was so happy when Mary returned to school the next day and told me that her grandfather was doing much better and had come back home. But that's just one story. That's the type of stuff our students have to face on a daily basis. This is Travis. He is one of the sweetest boys you'll ever meet, and he works very hard at school. Early in the school year, Travis was gone for a whole week, and we finally got a hold of his mother, who told us that he was sick. When it happened again a few weeks later, we asked his mother to come in so we could discuss his attendance. Travis's mother came in with a baby wrapped in a chitenge around her back and a coughing Travis by her side. She is one of our most educated caretakers, and her English is pretty perfect. She expressed how grateful she is for Haven of Hope and how much she wants her son to be at this school. She explained that Travis had gotten yet another bout of malaria, but she would be sure to send him back whenever he was healthy again. We could tell she looked exhausted, and Charity asked who else is at the home to help her. She explained that Travis has an older 10-year-old sister who doesn't go to school and helps around the house. She also told us that Travis's father is in prison in Ndola, and she is the only adult helping support the family. She spends her day traveling around the compound looking for any type of piecework that they have available. And in Zambia, piecework is any kind of chore, whether it be inside the house or outside the house, that people give to other people so that they can help do laundry or clean the yard for just a small amount of money. You can tell by looking at Travis's mother. With 80% unemployment in Zambia, everyone is struggling to make ends meet, and Travis's mother was no exception. You can tell by looking at her that she just wants more for her only son. She doesn't want him to have to beg for jobs or to wake up not knowing if he will be able to support his family that day. And so she does everything she can to get him to Haven of Hope. And as much as I love Travis and as smart of a boy as he is, you can still see the painful effects of his home life at school. You can see how he carries the weight of his father's absence on his shoulders. You can see how he mimics the older boys and the boys he comes in contact with on his way home from school. You can see how he feels the need to fight and be tough to show that he's the man of the house and he can take care of his family. Many children in Zambia are left to raise themselves while their caretakers spend their day trying to support the family. This creates an environment where children aren't quite used to having discipline in their lives, and they don't really know how to respond to it at school. Our students at Haven of Hope are not only learning reading and writing, but also what it means to listen and to obey the adults in their lives. They are learning to say sorry and admit when they have made a mistake, and that is a hard lesson to learn. We are still in the process, and every day brings a new challenge, but shaping leaders is never an easy task. This is Ephraim. He is one of our many victories at Haven of Hope. He was able to join our school last year because someone in this room said yes and decided to sponsor him. Since Ephraim began school, he has just blossomed in his education. Ephraim is in grade 2 with me, and he is the boy I always go to when I need help translating for my younger students. He is my best reader, and he always raises his hand, and I always know he has the answer in class. In January, when the school year began, we had an opening day where all the guardians and parents came in to collect their reports from last year. Ephraim's grandmother is kind of this bigger, older woman, and she just burst in the classroom and came over and gave me the biggest hug I've ever had. She thanked me over and over again for giving her grandson a chance to come to school, and she informed us that Ephraim is the pride and joy of his neighborhood because of how well he reads. His neighbors will see him walking down the street and they say, "There's our Ephraim." We are not just giving hope to one child or one family, we are giving hope to entire communities. And my favorite thing about Ephraim is that he gets it. Every single day he asks about and prays for his sponsor by name, because he knows that she is why he is at Haven of Hope. He understands that his hope is a gift given sacrificially by one like you. So these two boys are brothers. In the front is Warren, and in the back is Labuto. Warren is a grade 4 student, and his brother is in my class, grade 2. Teacher Esnart, who is our amazing teacher who teaches grade 3 and 4, has told me on multiple occasions that Warren talks about wanting to go to college and get a nice job so he can build a nice home for his brother and mother and get them all away from his father. He is 10 years old, and he is worried about protecting his mother. He is quiet and doesn't show you the hurt that is inside, but his younger brother is quite the opposite. You can see that his father's verbal abuse has shaped his heart, and while most of the time he is the most gentle, respectful student, he is my boy with the worst temper. When he gets angry, he physically starts shaking, and you can watch him trying to control the emotions he's feeling. But I'm happy to say that these boys are growing. They are learning that the pain they feel is not their fault, and it's not their responsibility. Haven of Hope gives these kids the opportunity to be kids. For at least 6 hours a day, they get to come and have adults take care of them, rather than them having to take care of themselves. They get to be loved and nurtured and taken care of. I can't tell you how many times I have stopped to put a Band-Aid on one student, only to have 10 more line up saying, "Me too, teacher, me too." They crave any kind of adult attention, and anyone who's ever visited can attest to this. They would rather spend their break time reading flashcards in the classroom with me than running around outside with their friends. And that is what Haven of Hope gives them, the chance to just be kids. This is Chris, and he is in grade 4. I'm not his teacher, so I haven't gotten to know him as well, but I notice how respectful he is. He is one of our quieter students, and he loves playing soccer. One day, I walked into the office to see Charity giving first aid to Chris's leg. He had been hit by a bike over Christmas break, and the wound had become seriously infected, so Charity was removing the scab to clean underneath. Chris, one of our biggest and toughest boys, was trying everything he could not to cry. But he finally gave in, and Charity told him it was okay. She later told me that Chris is one of our hardest cases. Last year, Chris's mother, who is an alcoholic, abandoned him and his younger brother and sister for 4 months. She just left the house. For 4 months, no one heard from her. They never knew if she was coming back, if she was dead, or what. But she did return, and when she came back, she brought her new husband, a witch doctor. Witch doctors in Zambia are very respected, but they are mostly feared. They use fear and manipulation to make people think that they need them, and I can only imagine how difficult it would be to have one of these men as a stepfather. The marriage only lasted a few months because he abused Chris and his mother, and thankfully she had the strength to get out. Today things are getting better in Chris's life, and I can only hope that when he comes to school, he feels hope for his future. He is one of our most selfless leaders, and you can just tell that his heart is full of compassion. He has known pain, but he wants to turn around and take care of the other people in his life who are in worse cases still. And that is what Haven of Hope is about. This is Carol, and she is actually at our school in Ndola, and she is another one of our victories. She has been with us from the very beginning of Haven of Hope. In fact, both she and her brother came to Haven of Hope, but her brother took a different path. He decided to take the gift that Haven of Hope was offering and turn away. He wanted to try his own way in the world. Today, Carol is in high school. She graduated with one of the best grades in our town, and she is in 9th grade at a local school. She has a bright future ahead of her, and she plans to return as a teacher to Haven of Hope. But her brother, Brian, is struggling. He lives on the streets, and he wakes up in the morning hoping that someone will pay him enough money so that he can get some more food. There was a recent group in Zambia who did a video, and they interviewed both of these children to show the complete differences in the lives of even one family, what Haven of Hope can do and what Haven of Hope cannot do if they don't accept it. It was so heartbreaking, but it's such a true and visual testimony of what Haven of Hope does for these families. This is Patience on the right. I know she looks like a boy, but that is a girl, I promise. She started school in February and was the quietest student I've ever had thus far. She didn't speak a word of English, and most days she just came in, sat in her seat, and stared at me with those big, beautiful eyes. Slowly but surely, she started to warm up to me. I knew I had finally broken through when I was doing some work at the desk during recess, and I felt a hand lightly resting on my leg. I looked out of the corner of my eye to see Patience just staring at what I was working on. Ever since that day, whenever I'm working during break, you can find Patience always to my left, just watching me, just wanting to be close to me. Patience is one of the few students who had perfect attendance this past term, so I was very surprised during our last week of school when her spot was empty. We went through the morning and we got ready to eat lunch when I saw two women I didn't recognize walking through the front gate. It was then that I saw Patience being carried by the second woman. She was crying hysterically, and I quickly went out to see what the problem was. Her aunt was trying to explain to me in Bemba, but I don't know enough Bemba right now, so I called teacher Esnar, and she came out. The only words that I understood were father and Chingola, which is a town about 60 miles away from us. Esnar turned to explain that Patience's father had passed away, and they were on their way to the funeral. My heart broke, and I looked at Patience, wishing that I could have the words to somehow make her feel better. Wishing that she understood enough English to know how much I loved her and how much my heart was breaking. But all I could do was stoop down in the dirt, give her a giant hug, and whisper over and over again, Nalitemwa, Yesu nalitemwa, which in Bemba means, I love you and Jesus loves you. Patience is 6, and she was finally starting to learn English and letters and numbers, but now her future at Haven of Hope is dependent on which family members offer to take she and her mother in. I am praying every day that she gets to stay in Lawancha and be a part of this community that is changing lives. Now, I can't show you pictures of my next student for privacy reasons, but I wish I could. I wish I could show you his beautiful face and his contagious smile. And I wish that you could hear his giggle and experience the life that exudes from him. He is 7 years old, but he is so tiny. He is like a little shadow that follows me around and bounces from one side of the room to the other. A few weeks before I left Zambia, he came up to me and said that his grandmother had taken him to the clinic that weekend to pick up his medicine. After asking a few questions, I started to think that maybe this medicine was for more than just the typical malaria or other sickness. I asked Charity, and she came to talk to the little boy. She came out and said that it was most likely what we thought, that this student was HIV positive. In a school of 54 students, we knew that there was a strong possibility that some of our students had the virus, but actually knowing it is a different thing entirely. About a week later, this little boy was abnormally quiet and refusing to eat his lunch. I went to sit next to him, and I asked him if he was sick, and he said no, but his burning hot forehead told me otherwise. There was another student who was already sick that day, so we called both of their parents, and they came to the school, and we asked them, because of Haven of Hope, they are able to go to the local clinic for free. But neither this student's parent or the other student's parents were available to take them at that time. I just felt like God was telling me, Amy, this is what you're supposed to do. So I took the students. And after getting shots and 3 types of medicine and lunch, I was able to take the children back home to where they live. I met this little boy's grandparents for the first time and was so blessed to see the love that they clearly have for their grandson. His grandmother quickly threw him on her back and wrapped him up in his chitenge, and he seemed so much smaller than he had a second ago. But he was at peace. He wasn't sick or worried or scared of the needles. He was just happy. It was so good for my heart to see their tenderness, to know that we are not alone in this battle. There are good parents and caretakers who love these students and want the best for them. And all I wanted them to know was that I was here as a friend, willing to come beside them and help raise this boy. Not to come in like some pompous American who has all the answers, telling them that they were failing, but to come beside them like Joshua holding Moses' arms through the battle. I wanted to help them during the hard times, because that's what the body of Christ is about. And lastly, there's George, another face that I can't show you because he's not actually a student at Haven of Hope yet. He's a 12-year-old double orphan who is the first name on our waiting list. One of George's neighbors is a student at Haven of Hope and told them about our school. At the beginning of this term, he showed up to try and get a spot. And unfortunately, we only had 5 spots at the beginning of this year, and they had already been filled. We told George that we would let him know if and when any spots opened up. Well, one day there was a bunch of confusion with the students and with our spots, and somehow George was told that a place had opened up. He showed up at school the next day in his Sunday best, and he had the biggest smile on his face as he sat down at the desk. Behind the scenes, we teachers were frantically going over numbers and students' names, only to realize the mistake that we did not have a spot for George. We had to try to explain to this 12-year-old boy who has never been to school that he had to keep waiting. The feeling of hopelessness washed over me as I watched the smile fall from his face. He took the disappointment so graciously, but all I wanted to say was, forget the numbers. We want you at Haven of Hope. But the reality is that we were already bursting at the seams, and there are many more just like him. 25, in fact. In the weeks after sending George away, we had a steady stream of parents and guardians walking through our doors looking for spots for their children. After 4 years, we have finally made a name for ourselves in the town of Lawancha, and people are starting to trust us. They are starting to recognize that we are a place of hope, a place where they can find support and advocates. So here we are. These stories can be overwhelming and hard to wrap our mind around, but I tell you them not to feel sad or guilty. I tell you them because I want you to understand that Haven of Hope is still just starting. We are breaking down walls and healing hearts, but there is so much more work to do. This is not going to be a quick or overnight process, but we are committed for the long haul. These are our kids, and we are choosing to invest in their lives and their futures. We are so aware of the barriers standing in our way, but we know that our God is so much bigger than these barriers. As you know, we are here today to talk about a building, but it's so much more than a building. This school represents possibility. It represents 143 more students. And more stories that we will be able to impact and shape over the next few years. Because for every story that I just told you, there are hundreds of more students in these communities where we work that have similar and worse stories that need hope. And even though I teach at the school in Lawancha and won't be directly affected by the school in Ndola, I can tell you firsthand why I'm praying for this school. I can tell you that as a teacher, these small houses that we are in is terribly limiting. It is hard to teach a class of students when another grade is there with you. It is hard to get creative when you have a tiny classroom and no room to move around. It is hard to have sports and other physical activities outside when you have no yard to play in. Today, Haven of Hope is small, not because of passion or lack of vision, but because of buildings. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to feel trapped or held back or limited by something out of your control. But once we finish this school building, we will be able to look forward to the next school building at Lawancha and eventually a high school and a boarding school where our students will be able to stay and live in community. I have spent countless hours with so many people dreaming about the future for these schools and these kids. Dreaming about the day when we have presidents and doctors and pastors and pilots and teachers and mothers or whoever. But our impact will be so much bigger when we have room to grow. There are families lining up for our help. We just need to figure out how to get them the resources that they need. And that's why we are here today. Because of George. Because I don't ever want to have to tell a kid no again. I don't ever want to have to look at a child that I know I can offer him, but simply can't because of lack of space. I want to continue being a beacon of hope for all who walk through the towns of Lawancha and Ndola, and that means expanding our impact. That means making room for more stories like the ones I've told tonight. And with that growth comes pain and struggle and heartache, but it also brings us closer to the heart of God. There is a generation of students waiting for hope. They are waiting for us. And how will we respond? Thank you.